1 hour before I was supposed to give my brother my bone marrow. He told me. The thought of having something from an ugly woman inside him made his skin crawl. Then my parents agreed with him. They thought I would still lie down. Let the doctors cut into me. And save the son who had just said he hated me. Instead, I pulled off my hospital gown. And reached for the donation consent form. My mother grabbed my arm. What are you doing? The doctors will be here any minute. Let go, I said, or I'll call security. My father stared at me with open disgust. Stop making a scene, Nora. Your brother was joking. Henry's voice came through the phone again. Casual and cruel. I said. I'm grateful, but donating is her duty. Isn't it? She's my sister. My mother sighed as if I were exhausting her. He isn't wrong. And you know. You've never been pretty like Talia. Talia, my cousin. The girl my family had chosen over me since childhood. The same girl who had wrapped her arms around my fiancé at our engagement party and kissed him in front of everyone. I had ended the engagement on the spot. My parents hadn't blamed him for cheating. They blamed me for embarrassing Talia. My father even said she had saved me from marrying a bad man. So I should thank her. Now. They expected me to risk my life for Henry. While all 4 of them punished me for refusing to smile at the woman who had taken my fiancé. The hospital door opened. Talia stepped inside carrying a delicate gift bag. Her face was arranged into perfect concern. I came to see Henry, she said softly. Then she held the bag out to me. And I brought you wedding favors. I'm getting married this weekend. Uncle said you'd still be recovering. So we didn't send you an invitation. Before I could answer, Henry burst out of the isolation ward. Despite the nurses shouting after him. Talia, I knew you'd come. My parents' faces softened instantly. They crowded around her while I stood beside the bed. Prepared for a surgery that would save their son. Talia glanced at me and smiled. Henry moved between us as if I might attack her. Why are you looking at her like that? You're an ugly, vicious witch. No wonder no one wants you. Then he looked me up and down. Honestly, the thought of your marrow inside me makes me sick. I stared at him. Since his leukemia diagnosis, I had stayed at the hospital day and night. I had researched every food he could eat. Washed his clothes separately. Booked a recovery trip to Sweden. And signed the donation papers. The moment doctors confirmed I was a perfect match. He knew all of that. He also knew Talia was a match. But Talia had a wedding to attend. A career to protect. And a life everyone considered too valuable to interrupt. Mine was apparently disposable. I turned to my mother, still foolish enough to hope she would defend me. She stepped closer and straightened my collar. For 1 second, the warmth of her hand almost broke me. Then she said, "You have always been such a disappointment. Look at Talia. She's busy. Yet she rushed here as soon as she heard about Henry. And you're about to ruin his operation. Because you can't control your jealousy." Her voice softened into something worse than anger. "This is why everyone loves her, Nora. And why no one loves you." Something inside me went quiet. I picked up the consent form and tore it straight down the middle. My mother lunged for the pieces. Henry shouted. I slapped him before he could finish. My father hit me so hard, I stumbled backward and crashed to the floor. More blows followed. I curled around my head while he called me ungrateful, vicious and worthless. When he finally stopped, he stood over me panting, "Get out. You are no daughter of mine. We don't need you. Someone else can donate to Henry." I tasted blood and felt something close to peace. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place in this family. My father had just released me from that impossible job. I pulled myself upright using the bed rail. My mother changed tactics immediately. Families say things they don't mean. "Are you really going to abandon your brother?" She offered to kneel. She promised to apologize on everyone's behalf. Talia took my hand and asked whether I could bear to watch Henry die. I looked at her. "He still has you. You're a match, too. Remember?" The room fell silent after Talia's father died. Mine brought her into our home. My parents placed every good meal in front of her. Bought her the clothes I wanted and praised her while calling me thin, dull and embarrassing. I fought for years. I studied harder, worked longer, and gave them money, gifts and obedience. I thought success could make me worthy of the affection they gave her. Freely. When Henry got sick, I volunteered before anyone asked. None of it changed my place. The unloved child could empty herself into a family and still be accused of giving too little. I should have understood that years earlier, when my only comfort in the house was my dog, Daisy. I used to hold her at night because she was the only living thing. That never made me compete with Talia. When my family noticed, my father accused me of caring more about an animal than my own blood. He threw a knife onto the balcony, locked Daisy and me outside, and said I could come back in after I killed her. Then my parents, Talia and Henry, left for a week-long vacation. It was the hottest part of summer. For 7 days, I survived on dog food and rainwater, while pounding on the glass until my hands bled. Daisy did not survive the heat. When my family returned, no one asked how I had stayed alive. My mother looked at Daisy's body and asked whether I was finally finished with my nonsense. That was the day I stopped begging to be included. Yet even after that, I still kept serving them. I kept paying bills, bringing gifts, and mistaking usefulness for love. Standing in the hospital, I finally saw the pattern. Clearly, they did not love me when I obeyed. They simply enjoyed what obedience gave them. I picked up the duffel bag beside the bed. It held steamed fruit, clean clothes, medicine, organizers, and the plane ticket I had bought for Henry's recovery. I explained each item, while my family watched with the same arrogant certainty. Nora would complain, cry, and then surrender like always. I dropped the bag into the trash and tore the plane ticket in half. Henry reached for it. That was mine. Asked Talia to replace it. His face twisted. Walk out that door and Mom and Dad will never forgive you. That's the first good thing you've promised me. Talia stepped closer, eyes red but dry. She offered to leave the family and give me everything they bought her. It was the same performance she had used for years. When I pulled my hand away, she staggered into a thermos. Hot water splashed across her arm. Henry punched me before I understood what had happened. My father locked my arm behind me. My mother seized my hair. They dragged me away from the hallway and beat me, while Talia cried that they should stop. Without making any real attempt to stop them, I managed to dial 911 and shout the hospital's name. Henry smashed my phone beneath his shoe. When the police arrived, I was bleeding on the floor. My mother pointed at me first. Arrest her. She backed out of a bone marrow donation and attacked us. She held up Talia's burned arm as proof. The officer looked from Talia's reddened skin to my split lip, swollen face, and torn clothes. This is assault, he said. All of you are coming to the station. For the first time, strangers saw what my family had spent years calling discipline. The officer saw my injuries and the fragments of my phone beneath Henry's shoe. That did not soften my parents. It only made them angrier. That outsiders were treating their violence as a crime. My father immediately denied that Talia had touched me. Not because it was true, but because she planned to apply for a government job, and a record could ruin her future. Even now, he was protecting her. He did not ask whether my injuries would affect my work, my health, or the donation he still expected me to make. My future mattered only when it could shield Talia's. Henry stood beside him, complaining that the police were delaying his treatment, as though the violence had happened to him. The officer separated us and explained that family did not have a legal exemption for assault. Watching my parents realize that discipline would no longer end, the conversation gave me more strength than their apology ever could. He transferred $10,000 to my account and told me to withdraw the complaint. I accepted the money. Relief flickered across their faces. They thought they had purchased my silence and restored the old order. Then I looked my father in the eye. Money won't fix this. His expression hardened. What else do you want? I gathered the torn donation papers and placed them in my bag as evidence. I'm going to the records department. My mother stopped breathing. Henry's face finally lost its contempt. I opened the door and delivered the one consequence. None of them had believed I was capable of choosing. I, Nora Harris, and formally cutting every legal and family tie between us. The corridor smelled of rubbing alcohol, old wax, and the metallic tang of my own split mouth. When I pushed past the double swinging doors of the 6th floor surgical ward, I did not run. Running implied panic, and panic belonged to people who still had something left to lose. Behind me, my mother's scream died against the heavy soundproofing of the hematology wing. Henry was still shouting from his isolation threshold, his Voice cracking on the word which, but distance stripped it of power. By the time I reached the bank of stainless steel elevators, the noise of my family had reduced to nothing more than the dull, ambient hum of a hospital running its routine. Officer Lawson stood by the nursing station, writing in a vinyl-covered duty log. When he looked up and saw my face in the stark fluorescent lighting, the purple welt rising under my left cheekbone, the torn collar of my blouse where my father's fingers had ripped the stitching, his jaw tightened. Paramedics are downstairs in triage, Lawson said, gesturing toward the elevator. We've got a patrol unit keeping your father and brother separated in the family consultation room. The young woman with the scalded forearm is giving a statement to my partner. Her name is Talia, I said. My voice was raspy, dry as sandpaper, but completely steady. She will tell you I lunged at her. She will tell you she was trying to calm me down. Lawson gave a noncommittal grunt and pressed the call button for the elevator. She already did. But the hallway camera sits right above room 614. The lens has a clean angle on the threshold. My partner's pulling the security tape from hospital administration right now. I touched the corner of my mouth. A drop of blood came away on my knuckle. Good. You want to press charges? Lawson asked, glancing sideways as the elevator bell chimed. Yes, I said. On Arthur Harris for felony assault. On Eleanor Harris for battery and witness intimidation. On Henry Harris for destruction of personal property and assault. Lawson raised an eyebrow. Most folks hesitate when it's blood. They ask for a night to sleep on it. They stopped being my blood 7 minutes ago, I said, stepping into the elevator cab. Now they're just 4 people who committed an aggravated assault in a county medical facility. In the emergency room triage bay, an intern named Dr. Miller cleaned the laceration inside my mouth and used a digital caliper to document the contusions across my ribs and upper back. Every flash of the department's forensic camera sounded like a heavy iron bolt sliding into place. Click. The red imprint of my father's signet ring across my jawline. Click. The dark purple finger bruises where my mother had pinned my wrists against the steel frame of the hospital gurney. Click. The linear abrasions where Henry's boot had caught my shoulder as I dropped to protect my ribs. You have 2 hairline fractures on your 9th and 10th ribs, Dr. Miller said, taping a thick gauze square over the worst abrasion. No internal hemorrhage. But you're going to feel like you were run over by a freight train by tomorrow morning. I'm prescribing an anti-inflammatory and 7 days of strict rest. No lifting. Can you print the full medical legal intake report right now? I asked. It takes an hour to sign off on the radiologist's notes. I'll wait. While I sat on the paper-lined examination table, I retrieved my backup phone from the bottom of my work satchel, an old device I kept for field audits. I connected it to the hospital's guest network, opened my banking application, and checked the notification log. There it was, a wire transfer of $10,000 from Arthur Harris, personal checking. Timestamped 12 minutes after the police arrived. Attached was a memo line written in my father's characteristic, imperious shorthand, medical settlement / family dispute resolution. He truly believed he was a master of commerce. In his mind, $10,000 was a magnificent sum to throw at an unloved daughter. It was the price of a second-hand sedan, or half a semester of Talia's tuition, a tidy payoff to wipe away 40 years of disdain and 3 cracked ribs. I did not decline the transfer. Declining it would allow him to cancel the transaction. Instead, I took a screenshot of the notification, forwarded the transaction receipt directly to Officer Lawson's departmental email address, and added a short note: suspect Arthur Harris has attempted an unsolicited wire transfer to victim's account within minutes of the assault. Preserved as evidence of attempted witness tampering and consciousness of guilt. Then, I opened my primary accounts and began the work of systematic eradication. For 7 years, because I was the only one in the family who understood tax codes, logistics, and property management, everything ran through my name. I had set up the auto-pay systems, the health insurance riders, the utility accounts, and the lease-to-own vehicle contracts that kept the Harris household functioning like a well-oiled machine. My father was a mid-level contractor who spent his profits on country club memberships to maintain appearances. My mother had not worked a day since 1994. Henry had dropped out of 3 different business colleges before cancer gave him a permanent excuse to do nothing. And Talia had lived rent-free in the carriage house behind my parents' property, driving a leased German sedan, underwritten entirely by my corporate credit score. I opened the carrier management portal. With 4 taps, I cancelled Henry's unlimited medical data plan, Arthur's roaming package, and Talia's $500 a month device tier. Next came the utility portals. The municipal water, the commercial electric grid. From my father's workshop, the high-speed fiber optic line at the main house, all registered under Nora Harris, sole guarantor. I submitted an immediate transfer of service request, scheduling full disconnection for 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Finally, I pulled up the primary checking account I maintained at St. Jude's Medical Center for Henry's treatment. 2 months ago, when the oncologist gave Henry his 4-month prognosis, my parents had wept openly, claiming they had no liquid assets to cover the private isolation suite, the imported immune modulators, or the dedicated 24-hour nursing staff. I had emptied my retirement account and transferred $68,000 into a dedicated escrow subaccount, naming myself as the sole trustee and authorized signatory. I dialed the hospital's patient accounts office directly. Accounting, this is Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable, this is Nora Harris. Account number 4409H, patient Henry Harris. Oh, Miss Harris, the woman's voice softened with professional warmth. We saw the schedule for this morning's harvest. Are you out of recovery already? The procedure was cancelled by the donor, I said evenly. I am calling to formally terminate the private room guarantee and the supplementary nursing retainer effective immediately. Revoke the credit card on file ending in 4102. Move Henry Harris to a standard general ward under county baseline coverage. A sharp intake of breath. Miss Harris, the baseline general floor doesn't have positive pressure isolation. His white blood cell count is the responsibility of his parents, Arthur and Eleanor Harris, I interrupted. They are present on the floor. Present them with the private room. Daily rates if they wish to sign personal guarantees. My authorization is permanently withdrawn. If 1 cent of my escrow is billed after 10 a.m. today, my attorney will file an immediate injunction against the hospital for conversion of funds. I understand, Miss Harris. I am updating the file. I hung up, lay my head back against the vinyl headrest, and closed my eyes. For the first time in 31 years, the air entering my lungs felt clear. It was sharp with the pain of bruised cartilage, but it belonged entirely to me. By noon, the news had begun to seep through the family network like ink in clear water. I checked into a secure extended-stay suite 3 miles north of the city center, a nondescript brick building with keycard-only elevators, subterranean parking, and an on-site concierge. I paid for 3 months up front using an independent business account my family knew nothing about. I was sitting on the edge of the unmade king bed, ice pack pressed against my cheek, when my phone began to vibrate against the nightstand. The caller ID flashed Julian Vance. My former fiancé. The man who had stood beside me for 4 years. Listened to me recount the balcony where Daisy died, held my hand while I paid off my father's tax liens, and then, at our engagement dinner in the garden room of the Bellevue Hotel, let Talia pull him by the neck into the shadow of the rose arbor while our guests were still drinking their champagne. I answered and put the phone on speaker. Nora? His voice carried that familiar, polished mixture of irritation and condescension he used whenever he felt inconvenienced. What the hell did you do? At the hospital? You're calling the wrong number, Julian. Talia's line is still active for another 2 hours. Try her. Don't be childish, he snapped. Talia is sitting in the waiting room with second-degree burns on her arm, sobbing so hard she can barely speak. Arthur called my father. He said you had some sort of violent breakdown in the hallway. Assaulted Henry, and tore up the bone marrow consent forms out of pure spite. Did Arthur also mention that he gave me 2 cracked ribs? I asked mildly. Or did he leave that out of the executive summary? Julian let out a dry, exasperated breath. Nora, you always exaggerate. You know how your father gets when he's under stress. Henry is dying. Dying. Do you understand the gravity of that word? You have an obligation as his sister. You can't just throw a tantrum because Talia stopped by to bring you a wedding Favor. The wedding favor was a nice touch, I said, looking at the bruised knuckles of my right hand. Considering she's marrying my ex-fiancé on Saturday. Tell me. Julian, did you help her pick out the silver ribbon, or was that entirely her creative vision? A brief, awkward silence stretched over the line before he recovered his footing. That's between me and Talia. We didn't choose to fall in love, Nora. It happened. We tried to spare your feelings, but you turned it into a public circus. And now you're using your brother's life as leverage to punish us? That is sick. That is completely depraved. If Henry's life is in jeopardy, I said calmly, why aren't you driving Talia to the pre-op suite right now? What? Talia is a 5 out of 6 HLA match, I said, reciting the lab figures I had memorized 2 weeks ago. She was tested at the same clinic. Her marrow is fully compatible. The only reason the doctors slated me instead was because Talia claimed a general anesthetic would interfere with her bridal preparation and leave her too fatigued for her honeymoon in Amalfi. That's entirely different. Julian's voice spiked with indignation. Talia has a delicate constitution. She's starting her orientation at the state environmental board next month. She can't afford surgical complications or an open pelvic puncture right now. You're built differently, Nora. You've always been strong. You work 70 hours a week without flinching. This was nothing to you. You're right, I said softly. I am built differently. For example, I have a spine. Nora. Listen to me carefully, Julian, I interrupted, leaning closer to the microphone. The wedding is in 4 days. The catering deposit at the Grandview Manor was paid from my card. The floral designer's retainer was cleared through my Chase account. The string quartet was booked under my corporate discount. I could hear the sudden hitch in his breath over the receiver. You thought you and Talia were paying for that lavish garden reception with her savings? I asked, allowing a thin, cold smile to touch my lips. Talia has $2,200 in a checking account and $16,000 in revolving credit card debt. The only reason the vendors took her calls was because my office manager sent over the corporate credit guarantees 2 months ago, back when I was still stupid enough to believe I could buy peace in that family. You wouldn't, Julian whispered, his arrogance finally cracking. The contracts are signed. You can't just cancel a wedding 4 days out. Watch me. I hung up, blocked his number, and opened my laptop. 10 minutes later, 4 emails went out to the event coordinators at Grandview Manor, the head florist at Petals and Vine, the lead sommelier at Vintners Reserve, and the transport company handling the vintage Rolls-Royce rental. Each email contained the same attachment, a formal revocation of authorization, a notification that the card on file had been reported compromised, and an instruction that any further services provided to Talia Harris or Julian Vance would be billed directly to their personal legal names. Then, I opened a bottle of sparkling water, took 2 prescribed pain tablets, and lay down on the crisp white linen sheets. For the first time in 5 years, my sleep was dreamless. At 7 o'clock the following morning, the front desk called up to my room. Miss Harris? There is an attorney downstairs who claims to represent you. A Mr. Vance Miller? Send him up, please. Vance Miller was not related to Julian, he was a partner at one of the city's most aggressive commercial litigation and estate firms, an old classmate of mine from my university days who had built his reputation by systematically disemboweling corporate embezzlers. When he walked through the door, carrying a heavy leather briefcase and 2 large cups of black coffee, he took one look at my face and whistled softly. They really did a number on you, Nora. It looks worse than it is, I said, taking one of the coffees. Did you bring the filings? Vance sat at the small dining table, pulled out a thick stack of blue-backed legal documents, and laid them out in 3 neat columns. Everything's drafted, Vance said, tapping the first pile. First, the formal petition for emancipation and absolute severance of kinship ties. In this state, adult kinship revocation is primarily a probate and medical power of attorney firewall, but we've attached a statutory non-disclosure affidavit and an emergency protective order based on yesterday's felony assault report. Once the judge signs this at 2 p.m. today, Arthur, Eleanor, and Henry Harris cannot contact you, approach your residence, or make any legal claim on your estate. Living or deceased? And the real estate? Vance pulled the second stack forward. His eyes gleamed with the professional satisfaction of a predator smelling blood. This is where it gets fun. I went through the land registry for the Elmwood property, your parents' house. When Arthur faced bankruptcy following the subcontractor default in 2018, he transferred 70% of the residential deed to your name to shield the asset from his creditors. He thought it was a temporary paper shuffle. But you kept paying the municipal property taxes, the structural insurance, and the second mortgage. Every month for 6 years, I confirmed. Which means under state property law, you are the majority titular owner and primary equity holder. Arthur and Eleanor are effectively tenants at will, occupying 70% of an estate owned by you. Vance slid a crimson folder across the wood. I have drafted a 30-day notice to quit and vacate. If they don't buy out your 70% equity at full current fair market value, which is roughly $620,000, within 30 days, we force a partition sale on the courthouse steps. They don't have $62,000, let alone $600,000, I said. Then the sheriff posts the yellow notice on the front door on the 31st day, Vance said smoothly. Now, what about the cousin? Talia? What about her? She's applying for the senior policy analyst position at the Department of Environmental Protection, right? Vance pulled a single sheet of paper from his briefcase. The background vetting process for that tier requires an active character affidavit and an absence of pending criminal investigations. Lawson's department just finished processing the security footage from room 614. Talia's statement, the one where she claimed you initiated the physical confrontation by throwing boiling water at her, has been formally flagged as a false police report. I looked down at the copy of the detective's supplementary notes. Surveillance review shows person of interest, Talia Harris, intentionally backing into the bedside table while handling the thermal container. Victim, Nora Harris, was seated 3 feet away with hands in her lap. Poi Talia Harris staged the spill prior to the physical altercation initiated by Arthur Harris. The district attorney's office is reviewing it for misdemeanor filing of a false instrument, Vance said. If charged, her state civil service eligibility is dead on arrival. Do you want me to send a courtesy copy of the incident report to the hiring committee? I took a slow sip of the bitter coffee, feeling the heat settle deep in my chest. Not yet, I said. Vance looked up, surprised. You're going soft. No, I replied, setting the porcelain cup down with a sharp click. If you destroy her application now, she has all day to cry to the extended family and play the martyr. Let her go to the final interview on Friday. Let her walk into the state office building believing she has escaped cleanly. I want her standing in front of the panel when the formal indictment lands on the chairman's desk. Vance watched me for a long moment, a slow, appreciative grin spreading across his face. You really are done playing the obedient daughter, aren't you? The obedient daughter died on the balcony with Daisy, I said. What's left is just an executor closing out bad debts. By Thursday afternoon, the Harris family home on Elmwood Avenue was coming apart at the seams. I did not go near the property, but I did not need to. My phone, the secondary burner number I had left open specifically for the process servers office, received 7 voicemails between noon and 5 o'clock. The first was from my mother. The arrogance of Tuesday morning had dissolved into frantic, breathless hysteria. Nora? Nora, pick up the phone. The power company just pulled the meter off the wall at the workshop. Your father's refrigeration units are down, $3,000 worth of imported cedar is warping in the damp. And the hospital. Nora, they moved Henry. They moved him down to the 3rd floor, into a room with 4 other people. One of them has active pneumonia. He can't breathe in there. Nora. Are you trying to murder your own brother? Call the hospital administrator right now and put the card back on file. Do you hear me? Call them. The second was from my father. His voice had the thick, slurred edge of a man who had spent the afternoon drinking cheap bourbon in a dark kitchen. You think you're clever, don't you? Sending some greasy suit to hand me a notice to vacate? In my own house? I built this family. I gave you a roof when you were nothing. You think a court is going to kick a man and his sick boy out of their home for a worthless piece of paper? You come back here right now and sign the release for Henry's treatment, or so help me God, I will find out where you're staying and finish what I started in that hallway. I saved the audio file, converted it to an MP3, and forwarded it directly to Officer Lawson with the subject line, Arthur Harris, violation of emergency protection order / additional terroristic threats. The third voicemail came at 4:30 p.m. It was Talia. Her voice was sweet, trembling, and pitched at that delicate, bird-like frequency that had made every adult in our childhood rush to hand her the biggest slice of cake. Nora, please. Julian told me about the venue. Grandview Manor called us this morning and said the ballroom has been released to another party because the balance wasn't settled. The wedding is in 48 hours. The guests have already booked their flights from Chicago. Julian's parents are arriving tonight. If we don't have the ballroom, we have nothing. Nora, I know you're angry about Julian and me. I know you think I took him from you. But love isn't something you can control. If you just reinstate the guarantee for the reception, I promise I'll go down to the lab tomorrow morning and do the preliminary blood draw for Henry. I'll give him the marrow, Nora. I'll save him. For you. Just please, don't ruin my wedding day. I listened to the recording twice, leaning against the window frame of my hotel room, looking out over the gray slate roofs of the city. I'll save him for you. Even now, backed into a corner, Talia believed the world revolved around her performance. She was offering to trade a life-saving medical procedure, which she had previously withheld out of vanity, as though it were a bargaining chip for white lilies, an ice sculpture, and a 3-tier almond cake. I picked up the phone and dialed the oncologist's direct line at St. Jude's, Dr. Lynn's office. This is Nora Harris. Let me speak with the doctor. A moment later, Dr. Lynn's heavy, exhausted voice came through the receiver. Miss Harris. I was informed by administration about the change in donor status. We have less than 72 hours before Henry's absolute neutrophil count hits 0. Without the preconditioning regimen and donor harvest, his chances of surviving the subsequent sepsis are below 10%. I am aware, I said. Has Talia Harris contacted your office today to schedule the HLA cross-match verification? No, Dr. Lynn sighed. We reached out to her yesterday afternoon as the alternate match. She informed my clinical coordinator that she was medically unavailable due to severe chemical burns on her upper extremity and an acute stress reaction. Her burns are superficial first-degree erythema, I said. The police report confirms she suffered no tissue damage. She is currently negotiating to use the donation as leverage for her wedding reception. Silence hung over the line, the profound, disgusted silence of a veteran physician who had seen every variety of human selfishness and was still capable of being appalled. I cannot force an individual to undergo a surgical harvest against their will. Miss Harris, Dr. Lynn said quietly. Under state medical ethics guidelines, donation must be entirely voluntary. I know, I said. I'm not asking you to force her. I'm just asking you to make sure Henry knows. Knows what? Tell him that his match is walking around the city, picking up her wedding dress, while he lies in the general ward. Tell him that the sister he called an ugly witch tore up her consent forms, but the cousin he worshipped chose a floral arrangement over his marrow. Miss Harris. That is exceptionally cruel. No, Dr. Lynn, I said, my voice dropping to a flat, hard whisper. Cruelty was leaving a 12-year-old girl locked on a balcony for 7 days with a dead golden retriever in 90-degree heat. This is simply accurate bookkeeping. Saturday arrived with a low, leaden sky that threatened rain. The Grandview Manor sat on a wooded bluff overlooking the river, a neoclassical monstrosity of faux marble pillars, manicured boxwood hedges, and gravel paths designed for high society photographs. At 11 a.m., a flatbed tow truck pulled up to the main entrance of the manor, accompanied by 2 private security vehicles. I sat in the passenger seat of Vance Miller's black sedan, parked 50 yards down the driveway beneath the dripping canopy of an old oak tree. On the front steps of the manor, chaos had broken out. Julian's father, Richard Vance, a senior partner at a corporate accounting firm, who prided himself on his impeccable reputation, was standing near the entrance, red-faced, shouting at the manor's general manager. Julian stood beside him in his tailored tuxedo, his silk bow tie undone, his hands waving wildly in the air. Behind them, through the open double doors of the foyer, two movers in gray uniforms were carrying out the brass candelabras, the silk draperies, and the custom floral arches that had been delivered the previous afternoon. Because the rental deposits had been revoked and no secondary card had been authorized to cover the $10,000 emergency hold, the Manor's management had exercised their contractual right. The ballroom was being cleared for a corporate luncheon that had paid in cash. Then came Talia. She burst out through the side terrace doors in her $5,000 imported lace gown, the long train dragging across the wet flagstones, gathering dark stains of mud and wet pine needles. Her hair, elaborately curled and pinned with pearl clips, was already beginning to frizz in the damp river air. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice carrying cleanly across the gravel lawn. "My guests are on the shuttle from the hotel. The photographer is here. Richard, tell them. Tell them you'll write a check." Richard Vance turned on her. Even from 50 yards away, the fury in his posture was unmistakable. He didn't pull out a checkbook. Instead, he thrust a sheaf of papers into her face, the certified letters Vance Miller's office had couriered to the Vance household at 8 o'clock that morning. Letters detailing the 6 outstanding collections accounts under Talia's name. Letters detailing the falsified police report filed at St. Jude's Medical Center. And most importantly, the formal notice from the State Department of Environmental Protection, notifying the Vance family that Talia Harris's pending appointment had been indefinitely suspended pending an active criminal inquiry into official falsification and fraud. Julian stepped between his father and Talia, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He reached for Talia's arm, but when his fingers touched the lace of her sleeve, she slapped his hand away with a shriek of pure, unadulterated venom. "Don't touch me. You promised me this wedding would be handled. You told me your family had money. You're nothing. You're just an associate who lives off his father's name." Julian stared at her, the romantic illusion of the delicate, sweet, helpless golden cousin shattering in real time under the gray sky. "What did you just say?" Julian asked, his voice cracking. "You heard me," Talia yelled, her face contorted, all the practiced sweetness burned away by panic and humiliation. "Nora was paying for everything. She paid for your engagement ring, you idiot. She paid the deposit on your apartment. If you hadn't been so stupid as to get caught in the garden, she would still be signing the checks." Richard Vance took a step back, looked at his son with utter disgust, turned on his heel, and walked straight toward his Mercedes. He did not look back once. In the car beside me, Vance Miller let out a low whistle and reached for his seatbelt. "Well," Vance said, turning the ignition key, "that was remarkably cost-effective. We didn't even need to serve the second injunction." "Let's go," I said. "You don't want to stay for the part where the shuttle bus arrives with 60 of her high school classmates?" "No," I said, looking out the window as the first heavy drops of rain began to splatter against the glass, washing the dust off the windshield. "I've seen enough garbage for one lifetime." On Monday morning, the sun broke through the clouds, cold and brilliant. I walked into the county records office on 4th Street wearing a tailored charcoal wool coat, my hair pulled back into a clean, severe knot. The swelling on my jaw had faded to a pale yellow-green smudge, the cut inside my lip had healed into a thin, white line. Vance met me in the marble lobby with a leather-bound folder. "The probate judge signed the emergency decree at 9 a.m., Vance said, handing me the embossed parchment. "As of 30 minutes ago, you are legally an orphan. By choice. Arthur and Eleanor Harris have zero kinship status. In the eyes of the state, they are legal strangers. If Henry dies, you have no statutory obligation to his remains, his debts, or his estate. And the house?" The sheriff's department served the 30-day notice at Elmwood Avenue an hour ago, Vance said. Arthur tried to barricade the driveway with his work truck. The deputies cited him for obstruction, handed the papers to Eleanor through the kitchen window, and informed them that the locks will be changed on the 31st day of the month by court order. "Thank you, Vance." "Nora," he said, catching my arm as I turned toward the exit. His face was uncharacteristically serious. "Henry took a turn for the worse last night. Dar. Lynn called my office because they couldn't reach you. He's in the ICU now. Sepsis set in around midnight. They're saying 48 hours, maybe less. I stopped on the top step of the courthouse, looking out over the city. The traffic moved in steady, orderly ribbons below. People were walking to work, carrying coffee, checking their watches, living their quiet, unburdened lives. Did Talia go in? I asked. No, Vance said. She checked into a private wellness retreat in Vermont on Sunday night using Julian's credit card before he managed to cancel it. She's completely dark. And my parents? They're sitting by his bed, Vance said. Apparently, Eleanor tried to offer her own marrow this morning, but her liver enzymes are too degraded from 30 years of heavy drinking. She isn't a viable donor. Arthur has the wrong blood group entirely. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the cold morning wind pull at the hem of my coat. For years, I had believed that if I just worked hard enough, bled long enough, and absorbed enough blows with a silent smile, one day my father would look at me with pride, my mother would touch my hair with genuine softness, and Henry would see me as an older sister rather than an inconvenient servant. I had traded my youth, my dignity, my savings, and the life of a sweet, gentle dog named Daisy for that fantasy. And in the end, the fantasy wasn't broken by malice. It was broken by arithmetic. You cannot extract love from people who only understand consumption. Tell Dr. Lin I received the message, I said. Vance looked at me closely. Do you want to go see him? One last time. I can get an escort from the sheriff's office so they can't touch you. No, I said. No final words? I gave him my final words in room 614, I said. He told me the thought of having my marrow inside him made his skin crawl. I wouldn't want to make him uncomfortable in his final hours. 2 months later, the sale of the Elmwood property cleared the probate court without a single hitch. Arthur and Eleanor had attempted to contest the petition, but with no liquid capital to retain counsel and my paper trail of 6 years of mortgage receipts. The judge dismissed their petition in less than 20 minutes. The house was sold at auction to a residential developer for $840,000. After the primary mortgage was satisfied and the municipal liens were cleared, my 70% equity share yielded a certified cashier's check for $492,000. Arthur and Eleanor took their remaining 30%, roughly $140,000, and were forced to use nearly all of it to settle Henry's outstanding post-mortem medical balances, the funeral expenses, and Arthur's felony defense retainer. The last I heard from Officer Lawson, my father had accepted a plea deal, 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record for third-degree assault. Eleanor had moved into a small, damp, one-bedroom basement apartment near the rail yard, surviving on her baseline Social Security checks. Talia never got the job at the Department of Environmental Protection. The investigation into her false police report ended with a deferred prosecution agreement that required her to pay $5,000 in administrative restitution and placed her name on the state's Central Registry of Disciplinary Exclusions. Julian's father had publicly announced the cancellation of the wedding in the Sunday paper, explicitly stating that the Vance family had severed all personal and financial association with Miss Talia Harris. She was currently working as a receptionist at a mid-tier dental clinic 40 miles outside the city, living in a rented studio, her leased German car repossessed by the bank. None of them knew where I was. I bought 4 acres of rolling pasture land in the foothills of the northern mountains, 2 hours away from the coast. The property had a small, sturdy timber frame house, a deep stone well with sweet, cold water, and an ancient apple orchard that smelled of cider in the autumn sun. On a Saturday afternoon in late October, the grass in the orchard was dusted with the first crisp frost of the season. I walked down the gravel pathway wearing heavy canvas work pants, an old wool sweater, and leather boots. At the edge of the lower meadow, where the wooden fence met the line of sugar maples, stood a smooth granite boulder that had been pulled from the foundation during the house's original construction. Carved into the face of the stone were 5 simple words. Daisy. A faithful friend. 1999 to 2007. Beside the stone, a young golden retriever puppy, broad-pawed, honey-colored, with eyes as clear and bright as river amber, was chasing a dry oak leaf across the clover. When the puppy saw me, she let out a short, joyful bark, turned in a clumsy circle, and came bounding across the grass, throwing her entire warm, solid weight against my shins. I dropped to one knee, ignoring the faint, familiar stiffness in my ribs, and buried my face in her soft, clean fur. She smelled of dry grass, wood smoke, and cold mountain air. "Come on, Daisy," I whispered, scratching her behind her floppy ears while she leaned against my chest with absolute, unquestioning trust. "Let's go inside. It's time for dinner." She bounded ahead of me toward the porch, her tail beating a steady rhythm against the porch steps, where the golden light of the kitchen window spilled out across the dark, quiet earth. I stepped through the doorway, turned the heavy iron bolt in the lock, and closed the door behind us. The house was warm. The fire was lit. And there was not a single debt left to pay.